The emergency pods screamed through Kepler 442b's atmosphere like falling stars, their heat shields glowing white-hot against the alien sky. Commander Marcus Kane gripped his harness as his pod bucked and rolled, the automated systems failing one by one. The USS Horizon was gone, torn apart by gravitational anomalies near the planet's twin moons. Of the 300 souls aboard, only 12 escape pods had launched. Kane's pod hit the canopy of a massive forest with a thunderous crack. Ancient trees, their trunks thick as skyscrapers and covered in bioluminescent moss, absorbed the impact. He hung suspended 50 meters above the ground, his pod caught in a web of branches that pulsed with ethereal blue light. The silence was absolute. No birds, no insects, no familiar sounds of Earth life. Just the gentle hum of the alien vegetation and his own ragged breathing. Kane's survival training kicked in as he assessed his situation. The pod's life support was damaged, communications were dead, and his emergency beacon showed no response from other survivors. As he prepared to rappel down, something moved in the undergrowth below. Massive shapes glided between the trees, creatures the size of elephants but moving with predatory grace. Their hides shimmered with the same bioluminescence as the forest, perfect camouflage. Kane watched in fascination and terror as one lifted its head, revealing 6 eyes arranged in a crown formation and a maw filled with crystalline teeth. The creature's gaze fixed on his pod. It could see him. Kane held perfectly still, but the alien predator began to climb. Its limbs extended like liquid metal, finding purchase on the smooth bark with ease. Other shapes converged below, drawn by some silent communication. Kane realized with growing dread that he wasn't just stranded on an alien world, he had landed in a hunting ground. The emergency kit contained standard survival gear, a plasma cutter, medical supplies, water purification tablets, and 2 weeks of rations. But against creatures like these, he might as well have brought a flyswatter to fight dragons. The climbing predator was halfway up the tree, its movements deliberate and patient. Kane made a decision that would define his survival on this world. Instead of trying to hide or run, he activated the plasma cutter and began cutting through the branch holding his pod. If he was going to die, he'd do it on his own terms. The pod crashed through the canopy, and Kane rolled free just as the pursuing creature reached the empty wreckage. Standing in the alien forest, surrounded by luminescent predators, Kane felt something primal awaken within him. Humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain once before. It was time to do it again. The crystalline-toothed predators circled Kane with the patience of apex hunters. Their bioluminescent patterns shifted like slow lightning across their hides, and he realized they were communicating. Coordinating. These weren't mindless beasts, they were intelligent pack hunters. The alpha, easily twice the size of the others, approached with fluid grace. Kane backed against the massive tree trunk, plasma cutter held before him like a medieval sword. Inadequate, but it was all he had. The creature's 6 eyes studied him with alien curiosity, tilting its elongated head as if trying to understand what manner of prey had fallen from the sky. Then it struck. The attack came faster than Kane's eyes could follow. Only combat reflexes honed through years of military service saved him as he threw himself sideways. Crystalline teeth sheared through the bark where his head had been, gouging deep furrows in the living wood. The tree responded, its bioluminescence flaring angry red. Kane rolled, came up running, and learned his first lesson about Kepler 442b, everything was connected. The forest floor erupted around the wounded tree as root-like tendrils burst upward, wrapping around the predator's limbs. The creature roared, a sound like shattering glass mixed with thunder, as the forest itself fought back against the damage. Seizing the moment, Kane activated his plasma cutter and drove it deep into the entangled predator's flank. Alien blood, glowing like liquid silver, sprayed across the undergrowth. The creature's death scream sent the pack scattering into the depths of the forest, their bioluminescent forms fading like ghosts. The forest released the corpse, and Kane stood over his first kill on this alien world. His hands shook as adrenaline coursed through his system, but beneath the fear, something else stirred. Pride. Satisfaction. The ancient joy of the successful hunt. He had no time to savor victory. The creature's blood was attracting other things. Smaller predators emerged from the undergrowth, arthropod-like beings with too many legs and mandibles that clicked in rapid staccato. Scavengers, but scavengers with a mean streak. Cain began cutting into his kill, harvesting what he could. The creature's hide was tough as armor but flexible. Its crystalline teeth could serve as tools or weapons. Most importantly, its blood seemed to repel the smaller predators. He smeared it across his skin and clothes, marking himself with the scent of a successful predator. As he worked, Cain noticed something else. Where the creature's blood had spilled, the bioluminescent plants grew brighter, more vibrant. The very ecosystem seemed to feed on conflict, on death, on the strong consuming the weak. This world didn't just tolerate predators, it rewarded them. Night was falling, and with it came new sounds from the depths of the forest. Howls, clicks, and calls that spoke of hungry things awakening. Cain gathered his harvested materials and began looking for shelter. He had survived his first encounter, but this was only the beginning. The forest watched him with 1,000 glowing eyes, and Cain felt the weight of its judgment. He was no longer just a crashed pilot trying to survive. He was a competitor, a new player in an ancient game of predator and prey. And he was learning the rules fast. 3 days after the crash, Cain discovered that the forest was more than just alive, it was aware. The bioluminescent network that connected every plant, every tree, every blade of grass was a vast neural web, and it had been studying him. He had taken shelter in a hollow formed by the massive root system of an ancient tree. The walls pulsed with gentle light, and Cain gradually realized the rhythm matched his heartbeat. The forest was syncing with him, learning his biology. When he was hungry, fruiting pods would drop from above. When he was thirsty, moisture would condense on the walls. But the forest's gifts came with a price. It wanted something in return, participation in its eternal game of survival. Cain first understood this when a pack of new predators found his shelter. These were different from the crystalline-toothed hunters, smaller, faster, with hides that could shift from flesh to living metal at will. They moved like liquid mercury given predatory form, and they had been tracking the scent of his first kill for days. As they surrounded his refuge, the forest walls began to glow brighter. The light formed patterns, almost like a language, and Cain instinctively understood. The forest was offering him weapons. Root spears erupted from the ground at his mental command. Vine whips lashed out to entangle his enemies. The very air became thick with spores that clouded the mercury predator's senses. But the forest demanded payment for its aid, it wanted blood. Not Cain's blood, but the blood of his enemies. The battle was unlike anything he had ever experienced. Cain fought not just with his hands and his plasma cutter, but with the forest itself as his weapon. He directed thorn volleys with thought alone, commanded acid saps to flow from the bark, turned the very ground into a trap for his enemies. When the last mercury predator fell, its metallic hide dissolved into the forest floor, Cain felt a rush of connection unlike anything he had ever experienced. The forest's satisfaction was his satisfaction. Its hunger was his hunger. Its ancient, patient predatory instincts began to merge with his own. He was changing. That night, Cain noticed his reflexes had improved. His night vision was sharper. When he cut himself on a crystal tooth, the wound healed faster than it should have. The forest wasn't just protecting him, it was improving him. But the changes went deeper than the physical. Cain found himself thinking differently, seeing the world through predators' eyes. Every movement in the undergrowth was either prey or threat. Every sound was information to be processed and acted upon. The forest was teaching him its language of hunt and survival. He began venturing further from his shelter, testing his newfound abilities. Smaller creatures fled at his approach now, recognizing something dangerous in his scent. The forest had marked him as one of its chosen predators, and that marking was written in his very DNA. Kane discovered other benefits of his symbiosis when he encountered a wounded creature, one of the massive herbivores that grazed in the forest clearings. Instead of fleeing, it approached him with trust. The forest's network had communicated his nature: he was a protector of the balance, a keeper of the eternal hunt. As he helped heal the creature's wounds with forest gifts of medicinal sap and leaves, Kane realized he was no longer just surviving on this world. He was becoming part of it. The forest had accepted him not as a visitor, but as family. The question was, what was he becoming? 6 weeks after the crash, Kane had evolved into something unprecedented on Kepler 442b, a hybrid predator, part human cunning and part forest-born instinct. His territory now extended across 12 square kilometers of the most dangerous hunting grounds on the continent. Other predators gave him wide berth, recognizing the forest's mark upon him. But recognition wasn't the same as acceptance. The challenge came from the void stalkers, apex predators that existed partially outside normal spacetime. They could phase through solid matter, becoming translucent wraiths that hunted with the patience of cosmic forces. Their territory bordered Kane's, and they viewed his rapid expansion as an intolerable threat. The first attack came at dawn. Kane was tracking a wounded mercury predator through a grove of singing trees when reality itself seemed to waver. A void stalker materialized behind him, its form shifting between solid flesh and ethereal energy. Claws that could exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously swept toward his spine. Kane's forest-enhanced reflexes saved him. He dove forward, rolling behind a tree whose trunk immediately began shifting its molecular density. The forest was learning to fight interdimensional threats, using Kane's encounters as training data for its vast neural network. The battle that followed redefined the concept of warfare on Kepler 442b. Kane couldn't touch the stalker when it phased, but the forest could. Root systems extended into parallel dimensional layers, creating barriers that the creature couldn't easily bypass. Spores were released that existed in multiple phases of reality, choking the stalker even in its ethereal state. Kane learned to predict the creature's manifestation points, timing his plasma cutter strikes for the split seconds when it became solid to attack. The stalker, in turn, adapted to his tactics, beginning to phase only partially, keeping its claws solid while making its body untouchable. The fight lasted 3 days. By the end, both combatants had pushed their abilities beyond previous limits. Kane had learned to perceive dimensional shifts, his forest-enhanced senses expanding beyond normal spacetime. The stalker had developed new hunting patterns to counter the forest's interdimensional defenses. Neither could claim true victory, but when the stalker finally retreated, it carried with it a new understanding. Kane wasn't just another territorial predator. He was something new, something that could evolve and adapt at a rate that made him genuinely dangerous to the established order. Word of the battle spread through the forest's neural network and beyond. Other apex predators began to take notice. Some sent scouts to test his defenses. Others began forming alliances, recognizing that the balance of power on Kepler 442b was shifting. Kane established his first outpost that week, a living fortress grown from the forest itself, its walls capable of existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. He wasn't just marking territory anymore, he was building an empire. The forest responded to his ambitions by accelerating his evolution. His bone density increased to handle greater stresses. His neural pathways multiplied to process the vast amounts of data flowing through the forest network. His digestive system adapted to extract energy from previously inedible sources. Most significantly, he began to reproduce some of the forest's abilities independently. He could coax small plants to grow and bend to his will without direct forest intervention. He could sense the emotional states of other creatures through bioelectric fields. He could phase slightly out of normal reality, though not nearly to the extent of the void stalkers. As Kane stood atop his fortress, surveying his domain, he realized he was no longer fighting for survival. He was fighting for dominance. The scared pilot who had crashed 6 weeks ago was gone, replaced by something that would have terrified his former self. The apex predator of Kepler 442b had been born. 3 months on Kepler 442b had transformed Kane into something that defied classification. No longer fully human, not quite alien, he existed in a category all his own. His territory had expanded to cover nearly 100 square kilometers, but more importantly, he had begun gathering followers. The first to join him was an injured crystalline hunter, one of the same species that had first tried to kill him. The creature, maimed in a territorial dispute with a pack of void stalkers, had crawled to the edge of Kane's domain seeking sanctuary. Instead of finishing it off, Kane had used his forest bond to heal its wounds. The hunter's gratitude had evolved into loyalty. It became his first lieutenant, using its natural pack instincts to help organize the growing community of creatures that sought protection within Kane's territory. The forest network had spread word of a new kind of apex predator, one that protected rather than simply dominated. Soon, other refugees arrived. Mercury predators who had lost their hunting grounds to climate shifts. Aerial hunters whose nesting sites had been destroyed by seismic activity. Even some of the giant herbivores sought his protection, offering their services as living watchtowers and early warning systems. Kane discovered that leadership on Kepler 442b required different skills than human command structures. His followers communicated through bioluminescent displays, pheromone releases, and psychic emanations that he had learned to interpret through his forest bond. He led not through orders but through the complex interplay of threat displays, protection rituals, and resource sharing that governed apex predator societies. The real test of his leadership came when the Hive Queens took notice of his growing power. The Hive Queens ruled the northern territories through brutal efficiency. Each queen commanded thousands of insectoid drones, creatures with collective intelligence that could coordinate attacks across vast distances simultaneously. They viewed Kane's multi-species coalition as an impossibility that threatened the natural order. The war began with probing attacks, small swarms testing his defenses, analyzing his capabilities, looking for weaknesses. Kane's response surprised them. Instead of meeting force with force, he turned their own tactics against them. Using the forest network as a communication system, Kane coordinated his followers into a collective intelligence that rivaled the Hive Queen's drones. Crystalline hunters provided heavy assault capabilities. Mercury predators offered stealth reconnaissance. Aerial hunters became his air force. The herbivores served as mobile command posts, their massive size allowing them to carry multiple species into battle. But Kane's greatest weapon was something the Hive Queens had never encountered: adaptability combined with unity. Each of his followers retained their individual intelligence while contributing to the collective strategy. They could think independently and act in coordination, creating a flexible response that the rigid hive structure couldn't counter. The decisive battle took place in the Singing Canyons, where the acoustic properties amplified the forest's network effects. Kane led a force of 50 mixed predators against a Hive Queen and 3,000 drones. The odds were overwhelming, but Kane had learned that on Kepler 442b, intelligence and adaptability could triumph over pure numbers. He used the canyon walls to create acoustic weapons, turning the forest's songs into sonic attacks that disrupted the drones' coordination. His followers struck in coordinated waves, each species exploiting different weaknesses in the hive structure. When the Hive Queen finally fell, her death cry shattered crystals throughout the canyon. The victory established Kane as more than just another territorial predator. He had become something unprecedented on Kepler 442b, an apex predator who could unite other apex predators under his leadership. The forest network carried news of his triumph to every corner of the continent. That night, as Kane stood among his loyal followers, he felt the weight of evolution itself. He was no longer adapting to this world, he was reshaping it. The question was no longer whether he could survive on Kepler 442b. The question was what he would make of it. 5 months after his arrival, Kane had become a legend across Kepler 442b. His coalition controlled a quarter of the continent, and his reputation had spread even to the deep ocean territories where ancient leviathans dwelt. But legends, he was about to discover, attracted the attention of things that preferred to remain in shadow. The challenge came from the deep alpha, a creature so ancient and powerful that even the forest network whispered its name in hushed, fearful tones. It had ruled the planet's most dangerous regions for millennia, a perfect apex predator that had never known defeat. Other predators were territorial, the deep alpha was existential. It didn't just hunt prey, it eliminated competing evolutionary lines entirely. Cain first became aware of its approach when his followers began disappearing. Not killed, simply gone, as if they had never existed. The forest network itself seemed to forget them, their bioluminescent signatures fading from the neural web. Even Cain's enhanced memory struggled to recall their faces. The deep alpha wasn't just physically dangerous. It was a predator of concepts, of possibilities, of the very idea of competition. It erased rivals not just from life, but from memory and history itself. When it finally revealed itself, Cain understood why it had remained unchallenged for so long. The creature existed in a state of quantum superposition, simultaneously displaying every possible evolutionary adaptation. It could be armored like the crystalline hunters and fluid like the mercury predators. It possessed the dimensional phasing of void stalkers and the collective intelligence of the hive queens. It was every apex predator that had ever existed on Kepler 442b, combined and perfected. You are an anomaly, it communicated through direct neural interface, bypassing all normal senses. A contamination of the pure evolutionary lines. You will be corrected. The battle that followed transcended physical combat. It became a contest of evolutionary philosophies, the deep alpha's perfect, isolated adaptation versus Cain's hybrid flexibility and social cooperation. The alpha sought to erase Cain's very concept from existence, to retroactively prevent the idea of human-forest symbiosis from ever occurring. Cain fought not just for his life, but for the right to exist as a new form of life. The forest threw its full power behind him, recognizing that his destruction would mean the end of the greatest evolutionary leap in millions of years. His followers, those that could still resist the alpha's erasure effect, fought desperately to maintain their leader's existence in reality. The turning point came when Cain stopped trying to match the alpha's perfect adaptations and instead embraced his fundamental nature as a synthesizer. He didn't need to be the perfect predator, he needed to be the perfect coordinator of predators. While the alpha was everything, Cain became the force that connected everything. Using the forest network as a conduit, Cain linked himself not just with his immediate followers, but with every creature across the continent. For one crucial moment, he became the living embodiment of Kepler 442b's entire ecosystem. Every predator, every prey species, every plant and microorganism became part of his extended consciousness. The deep alpha, for all its perfection, couldn't counter this. It was designed to eliminate competitors, not to face an entire world unified against it. The combined will of billions of life forms proved stronger than even perfect individual adaptation. When the battle ended, the deep alpha lay broken, its quantum superposition collapsed into mundane reality. But Cain felt no triumph, only exhaustion and a profound change in his understanding of his role on this world. He had become something unprecedented, not just an apex predator, but an apex coordinator. He was the living link between all the world's competing forces, the synthesis that allowed cooperation without destroying the competitive drive that fueled evolution. The forest network pulsed with new understanding. Evolution on Kepler 442b had taken a quantum leap forward, and Cain stood at the center of it all. 1 year after his crash landing, Marcus Cain stood at the peak of the Spire Mountains, surveying a world transformed. The scared pilot who had once hung helplessly in an escape pod was gone, replaced by something that defied every category of life. He was no longer human, no longer alien, he was something entirely new. Kepler 442b stretched before him in all its bioluminescent glory, but now the patterns of light carried deeper meaning. They were the neural pathways of a planet-wide consciousness in which he served as both synapse and coordinator. His victory over the deep alpha had catalyzed changes that rippled across every ecosystem on the world. His coalition had evolved beyond a simple alliance. It had become a new form of life, a meta-organism composed of hundreds of different species, each maintaining their individual nature while contributing to a greater collective intelligence. They called themselves the synthesis, and they represented the next step in evolutionary development. Kane's own transformation had accelerated beyond his wildest imagination. His cellular structure now incorporated elements from dozens of Kepler 442b species. He could photosynthesize like the forest, phase partially like the void stalkers, coordinate like the hive queens, and adapt like the mercury predators. But more than the sum of these abilities, he had become something unique, a living bridge between different forms of consciousness. The forest network had grown beyond the planet's surface. Through Kane's influence, it had begun extending tendrils into space, connecting with the orbital debris from the USS Horizon. The crashed ship's AI systems, dormant for months, had been reawakened by the forest's touch and integrated into the planetary consciousness. Now Kepler 442b possessed both biological and technological intelligence, a fusion that opened possibilities neither could achieve alone. Other survivors from the Horizon had been located through the expanded network. 11 had survived in various locations across the planet, each having undergone their own adaptation process. But none had achieved Kane's level of synthesis. They looked to him not just as a leader, but as the template for humanity's future on this world. Standing beside him, his first lieutenant, the crystalline hunter he had saved months ago, pulsed with patterns of deep contentment. Around them, representatives of dozens of species maintained harmonious coexistence, their ancient predator-prey relationships transformed into complementary roles within the greater organism. Kane felt the stirring of new challenges on the horizon. Deep space sensors, now part of the forest network, had detected ships approaching the system. Other human colonies, drawn by the Horizon's final transmissions, were coming to investigate. They would find not the disaster they expected, but a revolution in the nature of life itself. He wondered how they would react to what he had become. Would they see evolution or abomination? Progress or contamination? The answer would determine not just the future of Kepler 442b, but possibly the future of humanity itself. The forest network pulsed with anticipation. Through his bond with the planetary consciousness, Kane felt the world's eagerness to share its gifts with new arrivals. Kepler 442b had learned that diversity strengthened the whole, that cooperation enhanced rather than diminished individual excellence. As the twin moons rose over the bioluminescent landscape, Kane felt a deep satisfaction that transcended human emotion. He had not just survived on an alien world, he had helped birth a new form of existence. The apex predator had become something greater, the apex synthesizer, the living proof that evolution's greatest leaps came not from perfecting isolation, but from embracing connection. The human who had crashed on Kepler 442b was gone forever. In his place stood something unprecedented, a bridge between worlds, a synthesis of possibilities, an apex predator who had transcended the very concept of predation to become a coordinator of life itself. The story of Marcus Kane had ended. The legend of the synthesis was just beginning. End of story.